Hello everyone and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah and today we're talking about low-cost travel and how you can lower the costs on an upcoming trip for yourself. My husband and I just got back from a month-long road trip that spanned from mid-February to mid-March, and we had an amazing time. And it was also one of the cheapest trips that we've done, and I wanted to explain how we did it and give some strategies so that you can do it too. I'll be talking about a lot of different layers here and different ideas. Maybe you can't apply all of them, but definitely pick and choose the ones that resonate the most. The first strategy is to pick cheaper travel dates. Every destination has more of a peak season and an off season, or maybe somewhere in between. And if you can avoid going to places that are currently in their peak season, and even better, travel during more affordable times of year, you can stretch your dollars a lot further, and that will apply not just in your airfare, but also hotels and different experiences. When there is less demand, you can get so much more for your money. Now, I know in many different situations you might not have the opportunity to change dates too much, but you can also use this to change destinations. So even if there is a destination you really like to visit, but it's the time of year that you have available is peak season, is there a more affordable destination that can give you a similar type of trip that's not currently at like peak season? So for us, we found that traveling during this time of year was actually perfect for both our schedules, since we work for ourselves, it's very flexible, and also being able to take advantage of cheaper deals. February is the least popular month to travel, and that was for about half our trip, a little over half actually. So because of that, the hotel costs were lower. It was a road trip, so we didn't have flights, but that was able to help us. It was mostly a national park road trip, so we were in nature a lot, but this might seem kind of like a silly destination for us considering that we don't drink alcohol and we're minimalists and we aren't gamblers or anything, but we actually went to Las Vegas, which was a city we had never been to before, and I was very curious about it and overall had a very nice time. But with that, I knew that was a more expensive city. It was the most expensive city on our trip that we went to. But what I did in advance was I figured out where we wanted to stay, and I looked at the entire month, or like a 6-week window of dates, and I picked literally the cheapest 4 nights in that entire month and a half window. So I made sure that out of all those times, we went for a much more affordable price. To talk about the range, we ended up paying about $90 a night for, it was the Park MGM Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. It's the only non-smoking one. And we really enjoyed our stay. But what's crazy to me is we checked in on a Monday and left on Friday. Had we stayed even just the Friday night, the costs tripled. And so it could have been hundreds of dollars every night more had we stayed over the weekend, which is when a lot of people come into that place. So by picking the cheapest dates in that 6-week window, it meant that we were able to have a much more low-cost version of that trip than someone else might have. We also were able to leverage our travel hacking points. So our trip ended up being 29 days long, and we actually only paid for 9 nights of hotels, including those 4 nights in Vegas that I just talked about. These remaining 20 nights we were able to book using points. And we have a couple different travel credit cards that we use. We've talked about this in a lot of videos, so I won't go into all the details here. But essentially, we had a lot of different points to use since we hadn't traveled in a long time. And just paying regular bills and that kind of thing, it does add up over time. Our last trip we did was actually last June. We did a road trip as well. So using these points here was able to help us be able to get more for our money. The other added perk is that even if we were doing free nights, because of some of the incentives that the cards have, there were different promotions to encourage people to do these trips. So we earned, for instance, 2,000 points per night we stayed at some of these properties, which then can be used towards future stays. And we didn't have enough points at the start of the trip to book the entire trip, but we booked the first portion And then using some of those bonuses as the trip went on, we were able to book several more free nights towards the end of the trip. So that was a way we were able to keep the fun going. You didn't have to have it all planned out exactly. We knew where we wanted to go, at least the gist of it, and then we were able to make those adjustments as needed. So this was an amazing way for us to travel more affordably because 9 nights of hotels is much less expensive than paying for 29 nights of hotels. And if you are someone who wants to book with points for different hotels, it's very important that you're understanding the dollar value of those points at the hotels. Let me give you some examples. Certain hotels maybe are great places to stay, but they have very inflated point costs. Just to use some of the Hilton hotels, for examples, there can be a range of cost per night of 20,000 points, sometimes to 100,000 points per night. Now, because we wanted to travel as cheap as possible, we stayed away from anything that was a higher end or more expensive hotel. We would rather stay 5 nights at a 20,000 point hotel than 1 night at a 100,000 point hotel. And so we often chose these more budget point options so that we could stretch our points further. Likewise, if it was, let's say, a Saturday night that we were on the trip, sometimes hotel dollar value costs would be increased, but their point values would not be reflective of that. So it would be more important to book those nights with points, whereas other nights, it might be the same cost of points, but it might just be $80 a night. Well, I'd rather just save my points for a higher end night and use actual money when it's just $80 or something. So that was definitely very helpful for us. Is it difficult to plan? It definitely takes a little bit more effort to go through. I look at those 3 groups I've mentioned and search what's available each night and what the approximate points and dollar values are, and I use those to make the best decision. So it's definitely not for someone who just wants to book something really spontaneous without researching. But if you're willing to do a little research, and quite frankly, I love it, then it's a great way to get a lot of free travel. Now let's talk about activities, since those can definitely cause a skyrocketing of price on your travels. We recommend trying to choose free activities or low-cost activities when possible. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of national park travel. We actually went to 8 different national parks. And what's great about those is that we have the National Park Pass. It costs $80 for a year, and you have unlimited access to visit any of the national parks in the US. And for us, this was amazing because at some of these parks, we were filling our days with lots of cool hikes and sightseeing, some wildlife viewing, and besides that $80 upfront cost, the rest of it was all included. It was also nice because there's even some free ranger programs there. So we actually got to, at Saguaro National Park in Tucson, Arizona, we were able to do like an evening wildlife viewing experience, and there were bats and stargazing. So that was ranger led and it was completely free. Or when we went to Carlsbad Caverns, it wasn't completely free to do a guided tour there, but there was a really nice hour-and-a-half long guided tour that was just $8 a person. So these type of low-cost activities where you can get a lot of mileage for a low cost is a great way to keep costs down. We also really try to avoid overscheduling because back in our early days of travel, I might think, oh wow, I want to do this, this, and this, but we're only in this place for 2 days, and I'd pack the days a little bit more. Unfortunately, though, if you've got multiple activities scheduled, you can't spend as long at each location because you know you have to get to the next one. And also, what if you're just not feeling it that day and you've got all these commitments? That doesn't really sound as relaxing. So I find that having one main booking or one main attraction each day is helpful. And then the rest can be a little bit more spontaneous. If there's something cool that you discover while you're there that you didn't plan for, you've got the time and availability in your schedule to make it happen. It's also really important to be honest with yourself about the activities you're doing. Are you doing it because TripAdvisor says you should or that it's top rated, or are you doing it because you actually like it? When Jake and I are going to a new place, we will look up key details about the area to see what's available. But the truth is, there's a lot of attractions, even top-rated attractions, that we just didn't really have any interest in visiting. so we don't waste our time and money going to these places. And I find doing this helps prevent travel regrets, thinking, oh, I shouldn't really have gone to that. We definitely still give different sites a chance, but it's definitely something, as we've traveled more, we're really in tune with what we actually like. So I've talked about it here. We love history museums, not so much certain art museums. So that's just a personal preference that we have. Of course, I know a lot of people who love art museums, and that's awesome. It's just different kinds of attractions. We really like a lot of the outdoor activities and nature stuff. But there's some people who want to go more so for shopping and walk around a bunch of cute shops, and that's not really us either. So it's all about finding your specific travel style and having that be the center of your planning and how you spend your time at your destination. And even after you have identified what this travel style is, it's important to do some cost-benefit analysis. Is a certain activity worth it that is very expensive? Just to cite the Las Vegas example again, since that was the highest cost location on our trip, there are a lot of really cool shows there. And we did go to a show with the Cirque du Soleil. It was about the Alta Beatles music, and it was fantastic. We loved it. And I booked the cheapest day and the cheapest time ahead of time. And there were a lot of other shows like that that we could have booked. And we did look into it. But we had the tough question of, these tickets, especially with fees, are like $150 to $200 per ticket. And we had to really ask ourselves, even though we know it would be awesome, is it really worth that high ticket price? We were able to enjoy the one show, and we're very grateful for that. And so we actually decided not to book other shows. Even though there were 2 or 3 other shows that we were very interested in, we decided it wasn't worth that high price tag at this time. Definitely could always be something to consider in the future, but that's a big trade-off for some of those higher priced attractions. I mean, even just one ticket to that 1 2-hour show is more than the whole year-long national park pass. So there's a lot of trade-offs that you have to think about. And we ended up having an amazing time just walking around and checking out all the cool architecture and the lights. And it was a good time. Food costs are also a way that travel can be very expensive. But we did a lot of strategies this trip to really help keep those costs down. We in general tried to limit ourselves to just 1 restaurant meal out per day. Some of our past trips, we probably did both a lunch and a dinner most days out to eat. And while that's certainly a lot of fun, it's definitely not as healthy and also much more expensive. So we really utilized grocery shopping more on this trip periodically. Some of the hotels where we stayed also had little kitchenettes, or at the very least, fridge and microwave. So an easy dinner option could be to get one of those frozen meals. Obviously, it's not glamorous, but for, $4 per person instead of maybe $20 a person, that can really make a difference. We also were sure to bring not just snacks, but also plenty of meal essentials that we're able to bring with us that were non-perishable. And those were nice to have, especially some of the areas near national parks are pretty remote areas, and there's not a lot of businesses or amenities in the area. Having these essentials made it easier for us. We also kept our beverages to just water. Now, admittedly, we do that anyway, just out of personal preference, but we did bring some essentials for Jake likes coffee, and I like an herbal tea in the evening. Let's say if I haven't done a dessert, that's kind of a way to sort of add that end of the day refreshment, if you will. And honestly, with how expensive drink prices can be, that could really that's a great way to keep costs down. I always say I'd rather spend money on food at a restaurant than a beverage. And even places, since we don't drink alcohol, even places now are more so having mocktails and things. But the truth is, even if I can drink it, I don't really want to spend $8 or $10 for something like that. So by just drinking water everywhere we go, it's a great way to keep those costs down and stay hydrated. My last tip today here is one of the biggest, and that is to really understand the hidden trade-offs with different travel choices, and especially thinking about the cost of flying versus driving to a destination, and thinking about when it makes sense to do which one. Of course, certain trips you maybe just can't drive to. It has to be a flight, or maybe you don't want to drive, and that's just not on the table. So of course those matter. some considerations that we make when flying are thinking about how far is the destination flying versus driving. And then we think about the time and stress involved of getting to the airport. How do you get to the airport? Are you driving to the airport and you need parking? Or are you arranging a ride service or having someone give you a ride? Then thinking about the stress and the different tasks you have to do at the airport. And then waiting to board your flight. And what if there are flight challenges? And then once you land, you need to figure out how to get to your destination. And there's a lot of these different hoops that you have to think about and extra tasks that come with flying. And so for us, if it's a destination that we can drive to more easily, we're definitely going to choose that option. Now, of course, certain destinations are much further traveling by car than it would be flying. And so you have to factor in gas costs. Is it going to be a multiple day trip in the car? Is there a cost for the hotels? I know we talked about our travel hacking meant that there wasn't a lot of the time, but you have to factor in that, as well as with your time, it's much less efficient. So if you don't have as much time off or you have to get somewhere very quickly, obviously that's not a great option. At your destination, do you have to pay for parking? Or thinking about if you're flying, do you have to get a rental car to be able to get around? Of course, some of these things I'm saying here are very US specific because things are so spread out. But in general, these trade-offs, reflecting about them, can help you plan your travel more effectively. Now, like I said, in this case, we were very happy to drive, and one of my favorite things about driving to different destinations is that I can see it all. I want to see whatever it is, even if it's kind of boring at times. You never know what you might encounter as you're driving to a destination, and there's so much beauty, and we encountered so much natural beauty as we were making our way to these different destinations on the trip. And I will just show some of the clips here where I would just film what we were seeing as we were just casually driving to our destination, not knowing that any of it was there. And for me, that's one of the best parts, is really getting to explore the not planned destinations, but that spontaneous stuff that you see along the way that is very beautiful, memorable, meaningful. For us, that's one of the best parts. And since we already have our car and there were no extra costs from that front, and a lot of our places were more remote, it made clear sense to travel by car. But of course, we were kind of far out from where we are, in the Chicagoland area. So that definitely, some people might have just picked one of those destinations and flown to it and flown back for a completely different travel experience, but not necessarily a better or worse one than driving. So it's all about the pros and cons that fit to your situation. I know, of course, us working for ourselves, and I even got internet in the car, so if we had a long drive, I could work during the day while we were in the car. So, that's not a lifestyle that is relevant to a lot of people, but it's all about personalizing your travel experience. And I think if you do personalize it based on your own desires and what you want to see and get out of your trip, I don't think you can go wrong. So I hope this video was helpful. I'll put some other of our past travel videos up here in case you're interested, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.